Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On today's show, we have 2 new stories from you guys.
Amazing!
The first is from my brother Jim in New Mexico, and the second comes from Melissa, who has a ghost story for us. If you read this week's blog, you already know that we will feature an OTR story from Suspense starring Ray Milland.
Yes, but do you understand it? Have you any idea what I'm trying to accomplish here?
Add in A Moment in Time from May 7th, 1949, and I think we have it covered.
I like that!
So let's get it started with this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by complicated train schedules. Have you ever tried to go anywhere by train these days? Today, it's easy and fun to do. However, when our country was younger, it was complicated and could even be dangerous. Here is our story.
The telephone circuits are humming with calls radiating out from FBI headquarters in Chicago to agents in the West. As our scene opens, we hear...
Denver FBI, Knox speaking.
Hello, Knox. This is Sam Judson in Chicago reporting a jewel theft.
I'm listening.
Mr. Digby, president of Giles Department Store here, reported it a short while ago. They're selling the Batson collection of jewels.
Some nice rocks in that batch, I'll bet.
Yes, and one of them is missing. A fabulous diamond bracelet.
Where do we go from there?
It seems that the bracelet was first missed about 3:30. Several customers have been interested during the afternoon. One man in particular stands out in the clerk's mind.
Well, what's his description?
About 50, gray hair, bushy eyebrows, and penetrating brown eyes. Very distinguished.
Anything unusual?
Yes, a slight French accent.
Well, where does the Denver Bureau fit into the puzzle?
Maybe it doesn't, but the chief wants all the westbound trains checked to see if we can locate the Frenchman. Assuming that the thief was in Giles' store in Chicago around 3:30 and left for the west on the first train, he would have caught the 5:30. When she goes through Denver, get aboard and see what you can see.
Well, how do you figure he left Chicago on a train and is heading for the coast?
It is pretty flimsy evidence, but oddly enough, he took the clerk's name. Said on his return from the west coast he would stop in again.
Can you beat that for boldness? Well, you may be right after all about his being on one of the western-bound trains.
That's for you to find out, my boy. Good luck.
Thanks, Judson. See you soon, I hope. I beg your pardon, but haven't I seen you somewhere before?
I believe it not, monsieur.
Funny, though. I thought I might have seen you in Chicago.
I have never been there myself. I passed through only on this train yesterday for the first time. I wish we had time to get off and look around.
Oh, you're traveling with someone else, huh?
Oh, yes, my wife, Madame Bedeau, and I left New York together several days ago.
Where you bound?
For the West Coast.
Well, I hope your business isn't too pressing, because I'm going to have to ask you to get off at the next stop with me.
Oh, but monsieur, this is some sort of a joke. 1 minute you wish to be my friend, the next minute my enemy.
On the contrary, Mr. Bedeau. I'm an agent of the FBI, and your description fits perfectly the case I'm working on. The mistake in your alibi also fits. Wouldn't I be foolish to let you slip through my fingers?
But I know nothing of this case, monsieur.
I have a wire in my pocket dated March 10th, 1945, confirming my instructions from our Chicago office. The story fits perfectly. This is it, Mr. Bedeau, where you get off.
How did Knox decide that Bedeau was his man? In a minute, Knox will tell us how, but first...
Well, I'm sure the detective has the right guy, but I don't really see any fault to Van Doe's story. Granted, I'm not as well versed on train travel in the 1940s, but it can't be that much different. I'm sure the detective will know something that we could not possibly know, so let's go find out.
And now, back to the solution of our story.
Being a foreigner who apparently had not done much traveling in this country, Mr. Badeau did not realize that there is no train service through from east to the west coast. There is always a break in Chicago where one has to change to another train. So when Mr. Badeau declared he had not been off the train and had come through from New York, I was pretty convinced that he was my man. And as it turned out, I was right.
Well, I did a bit of research, and the detective is quite right. There are 5 main passenger train routes across North America, 1 in Canada and 4 in the United States. However, in all cases, a change of trains is required. The problem I have is this. Van Doe never said he switched trains. I'm glad they got their guy, though. This 5-Minute Mystery was brought to you by Complicated Train Schedules. Well, I have to say that I have some news. The new story submission system is up and running. You can access it by heading to ronsamazingstories.com and clicking on the story submission banner. Just that easy. So far, we've had 2 stories sent in using the new system, so it appears to be working. Now, I did this to make it easier for you to get your tales on the show. You can also read your stories on the show yourself. If you want to do that, summarize your story, tell me you want to read it, and we'll work out the details via email. I want to say this one more time. We want to hear your story, and you know that you want to tell it. So head to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the story submission banner. I received this email from Curtis. Hey Ron, I really miss the old-time radio stories. I like the new format, but the OTR stories are cool, and I think you should keep them coming. I listen to a lot of podcasts that play them, but you're one of the few that explains what I'm listening to. Please don't stop. Curtis. Well, Curtis, first let me just say I'm not only an OTR provider, but I'm a fan. I don't plan to ever stop playing them, but I do want to get away from using them on the podcast. This is why the RAS radio show and podcast are breaking ties. The radio show will be my OTR outlet and will be available to you as a podcast once the change is made. The podcast will lend itself to all manners and stories, including old-time radio, but will be limited to the public domain variety. I hope that this helps you and that you continue to listen to the show. For the record, Ron's Amazing Stories is an on-air radio show. We're on every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, that's 11 p.m. Eastern. Stay tuned for more information on the upcoming changes to the format of that show. For now, the podcast and the radio show are still the same. To find stations in your area, head to amfm247.com or the RAS main website. And now, these are your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
We have had 2 stories submitted to our brand new RAS story submission page. In fact, it is the very first time anyone has used it. The first comes from my brother Jim in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Those of you who remember know that this is Jim's 3rd contribution. The last one was his incredible tale of while he was in Ireland. You can listen to that on episode number 307, Roslyn Chapel. His new story is just as amazing and falls under the category of head scratcher. I read it to you now in his own words. It felt like cheating, but it sounded like fun. I was going to drive from Albuquerque to Denver to attend a church convention. The trip was supposed to take 6 hours straight up Interstate 25. Anyway, that's how it was expected to go. My problem was that church conventions are, as you might imagine, deathly boring. There's usually no sensible reason for even scheduling these events, which means they always descend into arguments about trivia or bombastic political proclamations. A friend of mine who pastors a large church proclaims the pointlessness of these gatherings by bringing his entire staff, who spend every day of the convention working on the business of their home church, right there in front of all of the other delegates. My protest would be different, but to me it seemed a lot better. Instead of rushing to Denver on the freeway, I would turn duty into vacation by taking the back way. My route would take me north to Santa Fe, where I would leave the freeway to follow the Rio Grande up onto a sheer plateau, where I would pass through the ancient village of Taos. Then I would skirt the narrow slit between the Rio Grande Canyon and the towering peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. My route would take me through the high altitudes of the San Luis Valley of southern Colorado, from which the winding roads would lift me even higher into the Rockies. Eventually, I would pass Leadville, the highest incorporated town in the U.S. with an elevation over 9,000 feet. Finally, I would drop down to the Colorado River, where I would meet Interstate 70 eastbound for Denver. Needless to say, I was going to be late for the convention, if I got there at all. After all, there were going to be some tempting stopping points on the route for sure. It was well planned and was proceeding perfectly until it led to an event that I can't explain or even fathom to this day. The event I mentioned haunts me with the clarity of a Blu-ray movie, even 25 years later. I was driving 12 miles north of Alamosa, Colorado, with the green fields of the San Luis Valley shimmering in May sunshine on both sides of the two-lane highway that pushed towards the distant mountains. In the valley, the road is straight and traffic is scattered. I came upon a car moving very slowly. It was a convertible sedan of at least 10 years old. The top was down, and I saw two people in the front seats. I noticed that they were dressed in odd color and wore twisted hats into curling shapes that didn't bring to mind any of the cultures that were the soul of this region. On the rural roads of the vast Southwest, if you're going any speed under 70, you're impeding traffic. These people were going about 35. I came up fast and started what I thought was going to be an easy pass, when suddenly the driver of the convertible looked directly at me, smiled, and gunned his engine. I could see an 18-wheeler up the road that had seemed far away when I began my pass, but now was closing fast. I slowed down, intending to get back behind the other car, but the driver slowed exactly at my pace, smiling at me all the time. The big truck was bearing down on me, and I was trapped. He was mere yards away, and there was no time for me to even feel terror. And that's it. That's all I have. The next thing I remember was driving along the right lane with the fields of St. Louis on both sides of a now empty road. No car, no truck, no traffic anywhere in sight. But unlike the first part of this story, at this point, the clarity of memory is gone, replaced by a light mental fog that slowly lifts as my memory of the rest of the trip unfolds. What happened? The event itself stirs in my mind almost daily, but even after a quarter century, I have no explanation, no theory, not even a speculation. I've heard many stories of people who miraculously avoided car accidents, but this was different. In my mind, there's no way I'm not dead. The truck was too close, and the small car I was driving would have been crumpled like an aluminum can in a crash like that. All I can say for sure is this: under God's sovereignty, that day in the San Luis Valley was not my appointed time. Incidentally, I did make the convention and found it every bit as vacuous as I expected and didn't hang around there too much. Do you know that Denver has some of the most amazing shopping places and some truly great food? Well, Jim, what a great story, and I have to say, right here and now, I had no idea my own brother had been through so many strange events. This one boggles the mind. For those of you wondering about my brother's health, he has made a full recovery from his amputation, and just over a year later is walking again on his own. God has blessed our family, and I thank him for it every day. Thank you, Jim, for your story. Our second story comes from Melissa in Carmel Valley, California. She writes, "Love the podcast. Here's a story that happened to me while attending California Polytechnic State University, Cal Poly for short. It was the summer of 1997, and I was living with roommates in a house that had some invisible residents. We had been dealing with the typical poltergeist action in which, after about the fourth time, became annoying. Nobody would get hurt, but books would fall off the shelves by themselves, and one day, after hearing a pretty loud crash in the kitchen, we discovered broken plates littering the floor. It always happened when no one was looking, which was even more irritating. After a particularly lively day, I was getting ready to head out to the campus for my weekly radio show at the student-run station. Before leaving, I decided to verbally confront the entity out loud. In my room, I asked it to make itself known in front of us. As if on cue, a 45 record which was sitting on top of my stereo across the room came sailing out to me just like a frisbee being tossed. It hit my shins and fell to the floor. Now, I wasn't scared. I was satisfied that it had finally gained enough courage to show something in person. I thanked the ghost and continued on my way to the radio station. The odd thing was that we never heard from it again. I still can't believe it happened, but it did. I remember telling my dad about it shortly afterwards, and he said, "Have you ever heard of telekinesis?" I took this to mean that he believed I saw what I did, but couldn't wrap his brain around it and was looking for a more scientific approach. Anyway, thanks, Ron. Melissa. Well, Melissa, I can't wrap my brain around it either. Maybe the entity was just looking for someone to acknowledge it. You, having done that, made its day, and he, she, it moved on. Poltergeists, on the other hand, are known to be active and then stop abruptly. It may last for several hours or months. Most of the time, the activity takes place at night and includes moving objects, tapping sounds, loud noises, whispers, odd smells, and even shrieks. Your story fits perfectly with a poltergeist. Thank you for telling us your story. It's a good one, for sure. That's it for the stories this week. Please do tell us your story and try out the new RAS story submission form. Thanks again to Jim and Melissa. As promised, we have an OTR gem this week from the classic radio series, Suspense. It stars international icon Ray Milland. Milland plays a juror on a murder trial and finds an envelope containing a $10,000 bribe on the floor of a drugstore. The tale is based on an original story by Jack Finley. You might remember Jack as the author of the Hugo Award-winning novel The Body Snatchers, which was the basis for the 1956 science fiction film classic. Our story is called After the Movies and first aired on December 7th, 1950.
Autolite and its 96,000 dealers present Suspense. Tonight, Autolite brings you After the Movies, a suspense play starring Mr. Ray Milland.
I'd been called to jury duty a couple of weeks before all this happened. It was one of those kind of sensational trials. And the judge told us jurors not to go out in any public places where we might be approached or influenced. So I'd been sticking pretty close to the hotel. So it was a real treat when they said we were free for a couple of days because the witness was sick. Of course, the movies is a public place, but Ann didn't think that would really count, and neither did I. We went to the early show across the street from the hotel and got out about 9:30.
I thought she was darling. I didn't care so much for him, though.
I didn't think she was too hot either. Say, what's the difference, really? The first movie I've seen since the trial started. How about some ice cream?
We got those little cakes at home. Some ice cream might go nice with him.
I don't know if I can go home. You mean this jury thing,
Oh,
you
you're
know.
free for a couple of days. Isn't that what they told you? Not going to do any harm for you to sleep home tonight.
I suppose not. What kind you want?
What?
Ice cream.
Chocolate.
Come on.
Well, hello there. How are you this evening, folks?
Yeah, fine, just fine.
What can I do for you?
About a quart of ice cream, chocolate.
Right. Say, how's the trial going? You're on the jury, aren't you?
Yeah, but I'm not supposed to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, I should know better than to ask. Yeah, I bet you we have 5-7 jurors a day come in here from the hotel across the street. Hey, you think you've been on this trial a long time? Some people stay on for months. Well, I'll tell you what I think about this Harmon fella.
I'm not supposed to let anybody talk to me about it either.
Oh, say, that's right. I forgot about that. Well, that'll be 60 cents.
Yeah, I got it, Ann. Now, what did I do with my wallet? Oh, here.
That's 60 out of 1. And thank you. Well, I hope now that you know us, you'll trade here sometimes even after the trial's over. My name is Adelson.
Well, I'm Mr. Bennig, and this is my wife, Ann.
I'm happy to know you. I hope you'll be through with the thing real soon.
I hope so, too. Good night.
Al,
Yeah.
look what I found.
What?
An envelope on the floor right here.
Somebody dropped something, huh?
Yeah. It's open, too. I wonder if we should, to find the owner. Say.
Hey. Money, bills. Hey, let me see.
How much is there, Al? Al? How much, Al?
$10,000.
Huh?
10,000? Who dropped $10,000 on the floor of a drugstore?
In just a moment, Mr. Ray Milland in the first act of After the Movies.
Hello there, Harlow Wilcox.
Why, it's Santa Claus.
That's right.
What are you doing here, Santa?
Well, I thought you'd like to hear about Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, and Vixen.
Your reindeer?
No, my ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs.
On a sleigh?
Oh, well, I turned in my sleigh for a sky sedan, and since I replaced my worn-out reindeer... I mean spark plugs with ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs, why, I've been getting...
I know. Smoother performance, fast starts, gas savings. Ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs, are world famous for quality and dependability.
How right you are, Harlow. Now I know what you mean when you say...
Ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs are designed by the same Autolite engineers who designed the coil, distributor, and all the other important parts of the complete ignition systems used as original factory equipment on leading makes of America's finest cars. That's why Autolite spark plugs work as a perfect team with your car's ignition system.
Well, hang up a big stocking, Harlow. You've been a good boy to tell me about ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs.
Glad to do it, Santa. And whether you choose the resistor type or the standard type, you'll be right. Because you're always right with Autolite.
And now with After the Movies and the performance of Mr. Ray Milland, Autolite hopes once again to keep you in suspense.
$10,000? You mean the envelope was just laying there on the floor?
I almost stepped on it, and then I picked it up, and I saw there was something in it. Al, what should we do?
Well, gee, a thing like this, I don't know what to say.
Well, if I was you, I'd keep it. That's what I'd do. And since it was in my store...
No, we couldn't do that.
Well, I could. It ain't stealing. You found it. And it was my store you found it in.
We better turn it in.
Look, if there's a reward, we'll get together on it, won't we?
There's some kind of a note in it.
A note?
Yeah, in with the money. This is your first half as agreed in... no signature. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Me either. Hey, where you going with that money?
If anybody comes looking for it, we live on 5th Street, 229.
If there's a reward, we'll see you get your share, Mr. Adelson. Come on, Ann.
Don't worry, Mr. Adelson.
Don't worry. $10,000 is a lot of money.
I said there was nothing to worry about, but I wasn't feeling quite as breezy as I sounded. $10,000 is an awful lot of money. Ann was still trying to figure it out when we got home. One thing I'd always said about Ann, she had a good mind. Now she remembered the note, and she took off from there.
Al, it must mean something. It was written to somebody. It must mean something to them. And after all, it's $10,000.
Let's get on with the ice cream.
Oh, all right.
Look, Annie, if nobody claims it by tomorrow, we'll put an ad in the paper or something. It's not our worry.
Yeah.
Here, chocolate.
We could keep it, couldn't we? I mean, the law says finders keepers. If nobody can prove it's theirs, we can keep it, can't we? Isn't there a law?
Well, I guess as far as the law is concerned, we could keep it.
Of course, we'd have to give part of it to Mr. Adelson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Al. That money belongs to somebody.
All right. If they claim it, all right. If they don't, well, all right. Why worry about it?
It belongs to whoever that note was written to.
Uh-huh.
Now, listen. This is your first half as agreed in the E.H. business. But if they are not hung up when the time comes, don't expect to get the rest or stay healthy very long. No signature.
No signature.
Al, that last part about staying healthy, that's a threat. That's what it is.
Threat? Well, yeah, it could be.
The man who's giving the money is threatening the man who's getting it, that if he doesn't...
Doesn't what?
Al, don't be so dense. Help me a little. Doesn't do what they're paying him to do. It's a bribe. Don't you see, Al, this money is a bribe.
A bribe? Hey, that's right, Annie. You could be right at that.
Well, now we're getting somewhere. All right, a bribe. And it has something to do with something being hung up. If they are not hung up when the time comes, it says. What could be hung up that's so important to anybody? Jury. That's it, a jury that can't reach a verdict. Al, I'll bet that's it. Somebody is trying to bribe somebody on a jury to...
To what?
Al, those initials, E.H., Edward Harmon, the name of the man that's on trial. The jury that you're on.
Gee, I don't know, Ann. They all seem like such nice, decent people.
Yeah, but listen. This is your first half, the $10,000, as agreed in the E.H., that is the Edward Harmon business. But if they are not hung up at the jury, don't expect to stay healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense, Annie.
Al, we've got to call the police.
Police?
Well, sure. We've got to report it right away.
Well, maybe I should give it to the district attorney in the morning.
No, don't you see, Al? You're on that jury. Why, if we delay telling them for even an hour, they may think you've got something to hide.
No, I think I better wait till the morning.
If you don't phone them, I will right away now.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope this is the right thing to do. My name is Albert H. Bennig. That's right. I live at 229 5th Street. Yeah. I want to report something to you. There's a drugstore on the corner across the street from the courthouse, and my wife and I were in there earlier this evening, and my wife found something. Yeah. Well, on the floor. There was an envelope with $10,000 in it and a note. And we think it has something to do with the Edward Harmon trial. Yeah. No, just my wife. Yeah, she's sitting right here with me. Yeah, that's what I think. You'd be doing me a great favor if you'd... Yes, we'd wait right here. We'd be expecting you.
What did they say?
They said they'd send somebody up just as soon as they could.
Well, weren't they excited about it? Didn't they say anything?
Well, Ann, I guess with people like that, these things are just sort of routine.
That must be them now, Al.
I'll go.
I must say they took their time about it.
Oh, good evening, gentlemen. Come in.
Thanks. You're Mr. Penning? Albert H. Penning?
That's right. This is my wife.
How do you do?
No, how do you do?
I sort of expected to see someone in uniform. I should have known, I suppose.
Uniform?
Yes, you gentlemen are from the police, aren't you?
No. No, we're not.
Oh?
You expecting the police, lady?
Yes, we were.
You better not take too much time, Johnny.
I think you people got something that belongs to us. Something you found in the drugstore in the corner.
Oh.
We lost it there. Druggist told us you had it.
Well, we did find something, yes.
10 grand. And 500 in a white envelope.
Well, I guess it's theirs, all right, Ann.
Yes, but...
But what?
Well, I'm sure it's yours, but there was something else, too.
We better just give it to him, Ann.
The note. I always said that was foolish.
There was a note.
Yes.
You read it?
We glanced through it, of course. We thought it might tell us who the money belonged to.
And it did, didn't it?
No, oh, no.
Come on, lady.
Now, wait a minute.
This is a gun, man.
The note told you that the dough was to buy off somebody on the jury of the Harmon trial, didn't it?
You talk too much, Johnny. Come on, let's get out of here.
What's the difference? Use your head. All right, what about it, Mrs. Penning?
How did you know it was in the note?
We gotta know these things. We work for Mr. Harmon. We know you're on the jury, too, Mr. Penning.
Al?
Where are you from, Mrs. Penning? I mean, where do your folks live? What part of the country?
Why, Washington. Spokane, Washington.
All right. Mr. Penning, you go on down that trial tomorrow just so nothing had happened. Anybody asks you about your wife, you tell them she's gone on a little visit to her folks in Spokane.
Visit to my folks?
The case will go to the jury on Friday. If everything goes like it should, your wife will be back here safe and sound first thing Monday morning.
Oh, good Lord.
But you can't do a thing like this. You can't.
Be reasonable, Mrs. Penning. We gotta. You people know too much about this thing.
Well, we wouldn't say anything. I promise. I swear it.
Now, how can we take a chance like that? Harmon is up for murder. Better get your things together, Mrs. Penning. Go with us, Sam.
We ain't got all night, though.
I'll take the money, Mr. Penning, before I forget it. Thanks. I hope you understand our position.
What are you going to do?
Well, obviously, the money went to the wrong party. So we got to use another method. If everything goes like it should on that jury, your wife will be okay. But if it doesn't...
You can't. You can't do that.
Oh, but we can. Saves us a lot of money, too. And, Mr. Penning, not a word to the authorities. Your wife would make a cute corpse.
Autolite is bringing you Mr. Ray Milland in After the Movies. Tonight's production in radio's outstanding theater of thrills, Suspense.
Hey, Santa Claus, no kidding. Did you really name your Autolite spark plugs after your reindeer?
I certainly did, Arlo.
How come?
Well, for one thing, those reindeer were always unexcelled for fast starts, smooth performance, and gas savings.
And so are those ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs.
They sure are, Harlow.
And, of course, those reindeer are famous as a perfect team, just as ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs are famous for working as a perfect team with your car's ignition system. Because, you see, they're designed by the same Autolite engineers who designed the complete ignition systems, used as original factory equipment on many leading makes of America's finest cars.
Well, that's why you say they're ignition engineered, eh, Harlow?
Sure, Santa. So, folks, see your friendly Autolite spark plug dealer and have him replace worn-out spark plugs with ignition-engineered Autolite spark plugs. And whether you choose the standard type or the resistor type, remember, you're always right with Autolite.
And now, Autolite brings back to our Hollywood soundstage Mr. Ray Milland in Elliot Lewis's production of After the Movies, a tale well calculated to keep you in suspense.
After they left, I just sat there. Maybe another guy would have rushed right off and done something. But I couldn't. I had to think. It had all happened so suddenly, in less than an hour, the whole thing. And picking up the money on the floor at the drugstore and then figuring out from the note that it was a bribe to someone on the jury of the Harmon trial. The jury I was on. And those gangsters arriving and claiming the money and taking Ann as a hostage for my verdict. The police hadn't arrived. I left home, sneaked out the back way, took the side streets, and went to the office of the chief of detectives.
So you came down here.
What are we sitting here for? Why don't we do something?
Well, we got to know what we're doing before we start doing it. Anyway, from what you told me, I don't think she'll be in any real danger.
No real danger. She's been kidnapped by gangsters.
But why? That's what doesn't make sense to me yet.
I told you the money was some kind of a bribe. They thought we knew about it.
But you didn't.
How could we? Ann just picked up the money off the floor and...
They said that they'd have her back by Monday?
That's what they said. You can believe them if you want to, but she's my wife.
Okay. What do these two cookies look like?
I don't know. Average size, Doc, I think. I don't remember what they look like.
Did you catch their name?
I didn't ask them.
You're not going to be much help for a while, are you? Okay, it's all right. By the way, my name's Dan.
Oh. Mine's Al.
You'll probably be seeing quite a lot of me in the next day or two, so we might as well get acquainted. And, Al.
Yeah.
Take it easy. We'll find your wife.
His being friendly like that made me feel a lot better, but we still weren't doing anything. First, he got out a lot of pictures, and I had to go through all those, but of course I couldn't recognize anybody, and then he started making phone calls. That didn't make much sense to me either, except that he figured they might have a stolen car, and he was trying to check on it. Finally, he called a police car, and we drove back toward the courthouse. It was 12 o'clock, but Mr. Adelson hadn't left the store. He was anxious enough to talk, but it didn't look as though he was going to get us any place.
I tell you, Lieutenant, it was right there on the floor. Right there.
Yeah, but when you talked to these two men...
Oh, yes. Well, I talked to them. The one, that is. And he said he'd lost an envelope, he thought, in my store. And
Yeah.
I said, yes, we'd found it, and Mr. Bennig had it.
So you talked to them. What did
Yeah.
they look like?
Well, now, how can I know what they look like when they called me on the telephone?
Okay. I guess that's all, Mr. Adelson.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant. I wish I could help you.
That's perfectly all right.
But if there's anything else that you
We'll
think-
call you.
Hey, Mr. Bennig.
Yeah.
Did you tell him about the note?
Note?
Yeah, the note that was in with the money.
So there was a note.
Sure. In with the money. Wasn't it, Mr. Bennig?
Well, what about it, Al?
Well, I'm sorry. I guess I forgot. We drove back to 5th Street and parked in front of our apartment. Dan didn't say a word until we got into the elevator. And then he spoke to the elevator boy, not to me.
You take Mrs. Bennig and a couple of men down tonight about 10:30.
Yeah, that's right. Police?
Mm-hmm. What'd they look like?
Well, I couldn't really tell you. They had their hats pulled down, sort of. One was tall, and the other was short. That's about all I noticed. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah?
The tall one had kind of a limp. He had a cane.
A limp, huh? You hear any names?
Yeah, and now that you speak of it, the short one called the tall one Johnny. Funny, I didn't think of it.
The tall one and the short one, and the tall one's name was Johnny, and he had a limp.
But that breaks the case wide open, huh?
Yeah, I'll see that you get a citation.
We got off at my floor, and I opened up the apartment, and we went in. And he still didn't say anything. He prowled around the apartment, poking into bureaus and closets, but not saying a word. Then he came out in the living room and sat down in the big armchair and looked straight at me.
All right, Al. What about the note?
Well, I'm sorry, Dan. I didn't think it was important. You're not sore, are you?
Me? What have I got to be sore about? It's your wife.
Yeah. And I'm sorry.
Now, what about the note?
Well, all it said was something like, this is the first half as we agreed and no signature.
Have you got it?
No. They took it when they took the money.
And you couldn't remember that one was a tall guy and the other was a short guy and that the tall guy's name was Johnny?
But I was all upset. I didn't even know if I heard his name.
Are you trying to protect her, Al?
No. I've told you everything I can.
Okay, forget it. Now, let's see. A bribe. That means that somebody wants something or is on the spot. The fix will be on by Monday, they say. Now, who is there in this town that employs gunsels that would have a deal worth that much dough set for next Monday?
Oh, there could be a million deals like that.
Quiet, let me think a minute, will you? Johnny, a Kane, and a short guy. It's on the tip of my tongue. And it wasn't so long ago, either. Sure. Why didn't I think of it?
Think of what?
Bill Quinlan, the defense lawyer in the Harmon case. Those are his boys. Had him up a dozen times. He always comes and gets them off.
The Harmon trial?
Yeah, this Harmon is up on a murder rap. A bank robbery, a guard was killed. His lawyer's Bill Quinlan. Quinlan's bribed more juries than I got hairs on my head, if you could ever prove it. Get a couple of hung juries and they let you off the hook. He's pulled it plenty of times.
Well, isn't that a little far-fetched?
It's like I say, Al, it's all we've got. I'll have the boys check the jury list anyway. Where's your phone?
In there. Dan.
Yeah.
Dan, I'm on that jury.
You what?
Well, don't you see? If I opened my mouth, they'd kill her. They told me so.
So that's it.
I didn't dare tell you, Dan. I hoped you'd find her
Why,
without...
you long-legged, thick-headed idiot. Don't you think I've been in this business long enough to know it a little better than you do? Don't you think I know how to give people protection when I have to? Do you think we go around trying to get people killed? Do you know any more that you haven't told me?
No.
You know who the juror is they're trying to bribe?
Nope.
Yeah, okay. At least now we know where to start looking.
Dan.
Yeah?
You're not sore at me, are you?
Me? No. What have I got to be sore about?
We knew where to start looking, but it wasn't as easy as that. I was still on the jury, of course, and it didn't dare make a move against Harmon because of Ann. The case went to the jury Friday, and there was still no word of her. And, of course, I had to vote not guilty. They understood that. But as it turned out, the vote was 8-4, so it didn't really matter. With a hung jury, Harmon was scheduled for a new trial anyway. By now, it was Monday, the day Ann was supposed to return. But there was no word. What if they'd found out the police knew I was on the jury? It was nearly midnight when Dan came to the apartment. He looked as though he hadn't slept for 3 days. I hadn't either. He told me to come along with him. He didn't say much until we were way down on Avenue C in the Lower East Side.
Don't let it get out, fella, but I think we're going to come out all right.
When'd you find out?
About an hour ago. We trailed Harmon. That's why he got bail.
Dan, don't kid me. Are you sure that she's...
As sure as we can be. We know where they are. She'll be there. Now, that's the place, third house down. Ellis, you and Wilson stake out the back.
Okay.
Farley, Edwards, take the front. I'm going in. All right, get going.
Okay, Lieutenant.
Dan!
Yeah?
I want to go with you.
No, you stay in the car.
I'm going with you.
Okay, come on. Now, let's go. Now, there's a light in the front. They may give us a little reception, Al.
They wouldn't do anything to her. Would they, Dan?
I'll try the door. Yeah, it's locked.
Can we bust it open?
I got a skeleton. All right, close it behind you so the street light won't show us up.
Okay. They're coming.
Now, those are my boys. Let's try in here.
I don't think anybody's around.
Mm-mm. Come on.
Maybe they took us someplace else.
Shh. Quiet. No, Al. You better stay out.
Why? What is it? What is it?
It's her, Al. Your wife. She's dead.
She was dead. And the next day there was the funeral. A lot of friends came around and shook hands and looked at me sad. And I stood by where she was lying with all the flowers around her. This wasn't the way it was supposed to work out. Dan came too. For a long time he stood there, looking at her and my friends and me.
You called them, didn't you?
I called him. Yeah.
You called them, and she thought you were calling the police. That's why the police never showed up.
I called him. She was so insistent I had to call somebody. I didn't think they'd take her away. I thought they'd just take the money and leave, forget the whole thing. But they took her, too.
What about the money?
The money they paid me? For the trial?
The money for the trial, the $10,000.
I told you. They took it. They took the money and they took her. All except $500. I kept that in my pocket. They didn't get that. That's what I paid for the funeral with.
I know. We had the numbers of the bills when we picked them up later last night. They had it all except $500. That's what brought me back to you.
It's funny. I did it for her. To buy her nice things. And all I bought her was a funeral.
Say goodbye, Al. You'll have to come with me.
Suspense, presented by Autolite. Tonight's star, Mr. Ray Milland.
At my workshop, we make toys for all the little girls and boys. We work hard to make 'em right, make 'em perfect, like Autolite.
You said it, Santa. Autolite makes more than 400 products for cars, trucks, planes, and boats in 28 plants from coast to coast. These include complete ignition systems used as original factory equipment on many makes of America's finest cars. Generators, coils, distributors, voltage regulators, wire and cable, starting motors, all engineered to fit together perfectly, work together perfectly, because they're a perfect team. So, friends, don't accept electrical parts supposed to be as good. Ask for and insist on original factory parts at your neighborhood service station, car dealer, garage, or repair shop. And because all Autolite parts are original factory parts, you can be sure you're right, because you're always right with Autolite.
Next week on Suspense, Mr. Alan Ladd as star of A Killing in Abilene. And in weeks to come, you will hear such famous stars as Dennis Day, Cornell Wilde, and Ginger Rogers, all appearing in tales well calculated to keep you in suspense.
Suspense is produced and directed by Elliott Lewis, with music composed by Lucien Morawek and conducted by Lud Gluskin. Parts of this program were transcribed. After the Movies was written for Suspense by Jack Finney and was adapted by Robert L. Richards and David Ellis. Ray Milland appeared by arrangement with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, producers of the Technicolor picture King Solomon's Mines, with Deborah Carr, Stuart Granger, and Richard Carlson.
And remember, next week on Suspense, Mr. Alan Ladd in A Killing in Abilene.
You can buy world-famous Autolite resistor-type or standard-type spark plugs, Autolite safe-full batteries, Autolite electrical parts at your neighborhood Autolite dealers. Switch to Autolite. Good night.
This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
The only thing I really didn't get about this episode was the title. After the Movies? What a strange name to give that one. Really, the only tie to the movies was the fact that they went to the movies before the story began. They could have gone to dinner, in which case the thing would have been called After Dinner. Want my opinion? I think the writers got writer's block. I did enjoy the story, and that ending was not what I expected at all. In fact, I expected the criminals to get caught and justice done. I guess that's why the tagline for the show was Tales well calculated to keep you in suspense. And now, a moment in time. The date is May 7th, 1949, and this is A Moment in Time.
They're off and running, and they got away right together, and not much interference. Halt was the first horse to drop back out of the running, and it is Kapot. Kapot going out there to try to make a runaway race of it, and Sonicus Coin, the outsider, going with him. But Olympia is right there at this stage, and Olympia is getting the lead. Olympia and Kapot, and John's Joy got in trouble right there. Olympia steps by the stand, a neck in front. Kapot, different tactics today. He's going right out with him. Olympia around the turn. By half a length, Kapot is second, and Winelist is third. Sonicus Coin is fourth. And on the inside, Winelist has got a little trouble. Not Winelist, no. It is Model Cadet got a little trouble on the inside. And the Kentucky Colonel on the outside suffered a good bumping. Olympia slipping away. He's a length and a half in the lead. And Kapot is second. Winelist is hanging right there in third place. And on the inside, John's Joy has slipped through again. And he is once more in contention and moving up very fast. John's Joy is now in third place on the inside. Olympia by 3/4 of a length with Archella sitting still. And the horse looks nearly to be galloping. Kapot is second, and his jockey is sitting still also. John's Joy is third, and going up fast on the outside is Palestinian, now in sixth, now in fifth, and I'm looking for old Rockford. He's locked in behind there someplace. I can't locate him for just a moment. Old Rockford is in there, though. He must be. And as they go around the turn, Olympia is still a length on the lead. Kapot is giving the real contention, and Palestinian on the outside is making his drive. Model Cadet has gotten into position, and as they come for home, Olympia is still saying, "Catch me, boys, if you can," but Kapot is sticking to him, and Palestinian is right there in third place on the outside. And as they straighten away for home, old Rockford is fourth, and coming through between if he don't get cut off. Olympia's tiring. Kapot has got Olympia. Kapot has got him driving. Archella is driving hard. Kapot has the lead. Old Rockford is third. On the outside, Palestinian is now second. Olympia will not be in the money. And coming fastest of all is Calumet Farm. Thunder on the outside, and Thunder is going to take it all. Thunder, the winner, with his ears looking, by 3 lengths. Kapot at the green 3 entries, second to 4 lengths. Palestinian was third. Old Rockford was fourth. Alt was fifth. Olympia was sixth. Duplicator was seventh. Model Cadet was eighth. John's Joy was ninth. And the others brought up the rear with Winelist last.
What you just heard was the 75th running of the Kentucky Derby. The race took place on May 7th, 1949. Now, why did I present this? Simple. This last Saturday, before a crowd of 157,813, Justify ran to a 2.5 length victory over Good Magic to win the 144th running of the Kentucky Derby. How about that? The voice you heard was Clem McCarthy, a sportscaster and public address announcer. He also lent his voice to RKO newsreels. He was known for his gravelly voice and dramatic style. McCarthy is also known for having miscalled the 1947 Preakness States. A crowd was standing on a platform, blocked his view of the far turn just as 2 horses with similar silks switched places. Years after McCarthy's death, sports filmmaker Bud Greenspan compared the audio of the race call with the newsreel film and discovered that McCarthy had stated, "And the crowd blocks me for a moment," at the exact point where the 2 horses had switched places. Not his fault. That's it. I want to thank my brother Jim and Melissa for their stories today. Coming up next week, we'll have more of your stories and a science fiction tale. Don't forget to use the new story submission to send me your stories. I can't wait to hear from you. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, it's so easy to do. Just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find all the links you need. We are on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many other services. Pick one and do leave some feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.